Right, well, we best just begin, just so it don't run over too much. Thank you all for joining us this evening. We are extremely grateful and happy that we have such a diverse and amazing range of panellists that are here to discuss networking with you all. I'll just run through some housekeeping rules. We are actually recording this session, so please feel free to keep your cameras on if you are comfortable with that, but you don't need to. However, we do ask you to keep your microphones on mute throughout the session, so there's no interference when the panellists are speaking. Towards the end, we will have a question and answer session, so you're more than welcome to unmute during that and ask a specific question to the panellists. But now I'll just pass on to Amalia to run through the structure with you all.
Hi everyone, thank you for joining this evening. So the structure of the session is we're going to ask each panelist to shortly introduce themselves. We'll then have sort of like 5 to 10 minutes for each to have their own presentation talking about their experience with networking and their top tips. We're going to do sort of like current students and recent graduates first, the future solicitors and barristers. We'll then move on to professionals. So we have Lawrence, who's head of chambers, and we have Robert, who's a legal recruiter. We'll then sort some questions that you guys sent in advance. We were sent quite a lot of questions, so we've picked the ones that we think were key to allow for hopefully a few minutes at the end for you guys to ask more questions in the chat as well. So we'll then begin now. Nirusi, would you like to go first and shortly introduce yourself?
Hiya, so my name's Nirusi, and I'm a second year law student going into my final year in September. And I just want to put it out there, I by no means am an expert in networking, but I would say I'm pretty decent at it. I've been to a lot of networking events. I have hosted a series of webinars on the bar, like recently, like last month, where I basically got a lot of BPTC students and barristers to come on and like have a chat about that particular the particular topics. And so the way I basically approach networking is in 2 ways. The first way is like the traditional way, which is face-to-face, and then the second way would be over social media. So I'm just going to start talking about the face-to-face networking first, and then I'll move on to how I did the webinars by using social media.
Sorry, Nirusi, could I just quickly introduce everyone else as well first? Is that okay?
Oh, sorry.
That's all right, no worries. Thank you. Should we move on to Saira? Saira, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Saira. I graduated in June 2018 with a 2-1 in law. I then took a year out and I worked and I saved up an extortionate amount of money to pay for my BPTC fees. And I'm currently doing my BPTC part-time at the University of Law in Birmingham, whilst also working full-time. Fortunately, due to COVID, I have lost my job. The last few months have been less busy, but I've tried to keep them up. So myself and another student on my course, Bethany Sterling, we held online bail applications, and I know a few people, just looking at some names down the screen, that also attended that event as well. I'm also, I did apply for a scholarship from my Middle Temple in my first year. I was unsuccessful. I did apply again this year, and thankfully it was successful. So that's helped a bit with the fees that I'm that I've had to pay towards them. In terms of sort of what we're talking about today, networking, like Nirusi said, I've done both the traditional, the awkward sort of face-to-face ones, when you have your 2-minute little pitch that you've memorised in your head again and again, but also the non-traditional ones. So it is just, you know, speaking to people on LinkedIn or Twitter or even on Instagram. Barristers are starting to come up there as well and having their own little Instagram accounts. That's a bit more informal. But that's sort of how I've got a lot of my experience. I think probably 2/3 of my CV is more from the informal side, and about 1/3 of it is from formal applications.
Thank you. Korhan, would you like to go next?
Good evening all, nice to meet you all. Thank you for allowing me to be part of this very exciting panel, looking at the names down the list. I did my LLB and graduated in 2019, and I'm doing my BPTC full-time at City Law School. The current situation has caused no end of problems for myself and other guys doing the course. It's been a major upheaval, and a consequence of that is the need to engage in more networking, especially on LinkedIn. My previous background is in digital marketing for global companies and devising kind of high-level strategies for those. And I will be approaching this discussion from a digital perspective and explaining how to optimize your digital profile, which is essentially your online reputation, to enable you to network more successfully. And I'll be speaking about the successes that I've had as a result of my networking efforts.
Thank you very much. Harry, would you like to go next, please?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Harry. I'm a future trainee solicitor at Baker McKenzie, and I recently finished the LPC at BPP Holborn. And for about the last year or so, I've been talking to lawyers and kind of producing resources for aspiring lawyers about the profession, and speaking to them with my podcast, More From Law, and been networking that whole process. So I started out 12 months ago with nothing but a laptop and a few lawyers on one hand I could count with. I've now had the opportunity to speak to a few from all over the world. So I'm hopefully going to be disseminating that info in what I did today.
Thank you very much. Lawrence, would you like to go next, please? Yes, okay.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Lawrence Power, and I'm a barrister, practicing barrister. I was called in 1995, so I've been around a while. And in 2003, I made a decision to open my own set of chambers, to do it its own way, a different way, a modern way. As naive as I was then, but crucially, one of the things you have to do is have the ability to network to build a business. And I'm here to share any experience I have with you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, that's brilliant. And last but by no means least, Rob, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, thank you, Amalia and Gabrielle as well for the opportunity. It's really great to be here. I'm Rob Hanna. I'm the founder and managing director of Kassoon Carr. We are a legal recruitment firm that supports a host of law firms from UK, US, boutique, across all the practice areas you might expect. I also host the Legally Speaking podcast, and similarly to Lawrence's mention just then, the reason I set up Kassoon Carr was to disrupt the legal recruitment sector, and a lot of networking has come around and has had to be done as a result of that. So I'll be happy to share my stories and journey along the way this evening.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that, Robert. Now, Nirusi, I know you was extremely excited to get in there, but would you like to now start and discuss your networking experience and your top tips for networking? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So, so the first way of networking, which is face-to-face networking, that's the one people kind of dread about and find, like Saira said, that they find it awkward and sort of discomforting. So the way I approach face-to-face networking is as not sort of one transactional, but a way to sort of get to know somebody. So if I am going to a networking event, for example, a pupillage fair, I would basically have a list of like chambers I hope to like go and talk to, and I kind of have an idea of what kind of practice areas they practice in, and if there's a particular barrister, I know who's going to be there. I'll research them as well, because I think a lot of professionals, they just don't like you just turning up and asking, so what do you do? What does your chamber do? So I think my first advice or tip would be just like research them, so you can sort of stand out in that sense and make a good impression. Other ways to sort of stand out when you approach a face-to-face networking is, I guess, just going for it, really, because sometimes you can overthink it, and you might go away not feeling as satisfied. I've kind of been there, so I just say, if you know who you want to talk to, just get in there. I think it can be kind of difficult at law fairs where like there are tons of law students trying to talk to a particular set or a firm, and that could be intimidating because it seems like you're competing with a lot of people. But if you really have to if you really want the answer to something, just go for it and ask them. Just show interest, show your personality, because they do meet a lot of people. So I think the best way is to kind of just show a bit of you, as cheesy as that sounds. But yeah, in terms of like what to actually say and stuff when you actually meet somebody, I think it's good to keep it formal, just because you want to make a good impression, but also again, don't let that like not show your personality through. So yeah, I think if you get nervous with meeting people face to face, I would also say just sort of have an idea of what you're going to say. So have an elevator pitch ready, and that an elevator pitch is basically like anywhere between 30 seconds and I think max 2 minutes, where you kind of just know what you're going to say as soon as you meet someone, because that can happen at any time. So you just know how you're going to introduce yourself and what you do and what you're interested in. And yeah, so that's what I would say if anyone struggles with that. In terms of, I guess, networking over social media, I would just say, just kind of get used to using stuff like LinkedIn and other social media platforms to network, just because we are in the pandemic period, and where a lot of law fairs and pupillage fairs, they are going to be online for like a few months to come, like until December at least. So just get used to it. That will make your life easier. And I think going forward, I think people kind of see the benefits now with networking online. So yeah, I think somebody asked a question about how do you network by email. So I guess I can talk a little bit about that, because when I did my webinars, because I did a series of webinars focusing on the BPTC, pupillage, the criminal bar, common law bar, commercial bar, on BAME barristers and non-traditional background barristers. The way I approached it was it depends. So if it was people I knew and I had a good relationship with them, it wasn't very formal. I told them what I was doing, and I asked them if they would be interested, because I knew most of them were lovely and they would say yes. Others who I met on LinkedIn, I just felt I know why I was approaching them, so it kind of made it easier. So I guess in that sense, just know who you're talking to and sort of what they're like. So when you ask them for something, or when you meet them, it's not awkward. It doesn't seem like you're being selfish, I guess. The way I went about meeting new people on LinkedIn and by email for the webinars in particular was that I basically introduced myself, and I told them why I was interested in that person in particular, and what they can kind of offer, and then also made it seem fun and interesting in the sense that there'd be a lot of other people, and I just made the webinar seem interesting, so they'd enjoy it as well. Over email, I would just say be formal but be concise, because a lot of these professionals are really busy, and so just be mindful of that. And if you do come across as professional and respectful of the time they're giving to you, it should like help you. So yeah, just before I end, I do want to say, just in terms of like the attitude you should have, or like the mindset going in when you are networking, is that just be brave, honestly, because otherwise, like I personally hate leaving a networking event feeling like I haven't really got anything out of it. I hate feeling regretful, so I just kind of go for it. But again, like it is intimidating because there's a lot of people around trying to talk to these professionals, and just get a friend with you and like take them with you and just talk, because that can make you feel a bit better as well. And I guess think about it in the sense that networking is something you're going to have to do for the rest of your life. Like I'm an aspiring barrister, and so when I think about networking events, I kind of think about it as a practice, just because when I become a self-employed barrister, because I am self-employed, I'm the one who will try and have to go after clients and solicitors. And so if you think about it like that as a way for you to like learn and grow and improve, then you're not really doing anything wrong. And so, yeah, and, you know, networking doesn't even have to be with legal professionals. Like, often we can just learn how to network by just meeting new people and kind of building up that confidence. So when it comes to an event where you are networking, it will just be that much easier because you're used to sort of talking to people and introducing yourself. So yeah, that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Nirusi. That was really, really helpful and interesting as well. Saira, would you like to go next, please?
Yeah, to be honest, I agree with everything that Nirusi has said already. Definitely in terms of sort of the face-to-face. I think one of the biggest things is to actually research where you're going to go. So for me, my main area is family law. So for me to go to a networking event where it's a majority of criminal barristers, it's a waste of my time, but it's a waste of their time speaking to me also. So make sure that if you are going, you know, hopefully when we get face-to-face networking events soon, that you're targeting where you're going so you can make the most out of it as well. And I think a lot of the time, especially with sort of face-to-face, it tends to be those more natural conversations. It doesn't tend to be, you know, the forced ones where you go up and you shake their hands and you introduce yourself and it's all very stiff and very proper. Those ones I've found I've not really gained anything from that. I've not really made much of a connection with that person, or it feels very false. I think that's something a lot of people can agree with. So for me, it's those natural ones. So even if you're speaking to a barrister and you say, you know, I've seen this in the news about such and such, and I found that really interesting, or something that hits their area of law, and even if it's not their area of law. So for this is when all my little stories start coming out. So for example, with me, I went to a networking event about a year or two ago with St. Philip's Chambers. It's a very prominent chambers in the Birmingham region. And I was looking at one of their barristers, and she had the most amazing pair of shoes. Like, they were to die for. I absolutely loved them. And so I asked her, I just said, oh, where are your shoes from? And that literally just sparked a whole conversation, and it had nothing to do with law at all. And actually, still to this day, I still speak to that barrister. And from that, just a small conversation, nothing law related, completely away from law, we've built this whole friendship, and I've actually been able to go on mini pupilages with her and to be able to put that onto my CV. And I found that it's those sort of conversations, the one where they're a bit more relaxed, they've got nothing to do with what that barrister's doing in their day-to-day life. Those are the ones where you get the most out of those friendships and most out of those experiences. And I think Amalia would agree with me. I think I've said it to her probably more than once, but even if you get one day, if it's a one-day mini pupillage, if it's a one day at a solicitor's firm, that is still experience. So for example, if I went to Lawrence's Chambers, I would still put mini pupil at 4 Kings Bench Walk, and I did this for the day, because that is still experience. I think people think the only way you can get any experience is it has to be a week long, or it has to be a month long black scheme. It has to be something big. But even for me, I found that you can have one day and you could be with 4 different barristers. You can be in this court, you can be in that court, and the variety you can get from one day says so much. So I think don't forget that as well. Even if you are reaching out to barristers and you feel a bit shy and you think, oh, asking them for a week with them might be a bit too much, even just ask for a day and see how that goes. Again, in terms of just reaching out, not just to barristers but solicitors also, what I found and what I really love about the legal sector is even if that person can't help you, they will point you in the direction of someone who can. So that's what I've found. So I've reached out to barristers. I thought they did family law. A Chambers profile said they do family law. Turns out they actually didn't. They did like a case in their second 6 and that was it. Their Chambers thought it'd be great to put family law on their Chambers profile for them. But they point you in the direction of someone who can help you. And I think especially if you're going to go to networking events, if it is face-to-face and you meet someone and maybe they're not really in that type of area that you want to go into, see if they know someone who can help you, because it can just simply say, I want to go into commercial, but more than that, I actually want to do a bit of tax as well. And they might know someone who is in a tax set that can help you. And sometimes it's those sort of more natural conversations that can be so beneficial for you as well, because you've then, out of making one conversation, you've got 2 connections. So it's almost beneficial to always ask if there's something very niche that you want to do, if they know a barrister in that area. Again, just in terms of other social networking, so I'm very strong on sort of my Twitter front. My LinkedIn, I know I'm nowhere near Harry Clark on LinkedIn, but I definitely am on my Twitter. That's something that I am quite strong at. Just reaching out to barristers. Sometimes they're having a conversation, they're having an argument, having a debate, and you're just saying, okay, so Mr. QC, can you please just explain this to me? Why is it that you believe that the case in, for example, there was a family case on billiards and billiards. Why do you think that the husband was correct in this case? Or why do you think that the wife should have won in this case? And they will actually give you a full response. Even if you just DM them or you send them a polite message, I think that's one of the biggest things is don't be rude, don't be pushy. I can say that both on terms of just solicitors. Solicitors have billing hours that they do need to meet, and for them to take time away to send an email to you is actually coming out of time when, you know, their company needs to be making money. And the same for barristers as well. They are self-employed, so for them to take time out of their day, even just to send an email to you, it's detracting from casework. I think to remember that, but also be quite polite in terms of turnaround. So if you do send an email, it may be a day or two before you get a response. Don't just send an email, think within 5 minutes they're going to respond to you. What else? I think, yeah, definitely with sort of social media, it is coming up quite apparent. So for me, I actually was able to work as a barrister's assistant over the summer. And that was simply because I just Googled best family chambers. I found the best family chambers there was. It was in London, and I looked them up on Legal 500 and Chambers and Partners, found out which was the best family barrister in the country at that time, and I sent an email. That was literally what I did, but I'm very targeted in how I send my emails. So hopefully Lawrence is not going to listen to this part, because this is another one of my little tricks I do. You go onto a Chambers profile and you see a barrister that's doing exactly the work you want to do. They will either have two things in terms of an email. They will either have a clerks at email address on their profile, or they will have their personal one. Now, if it says clerks at, it's likely that that means their clerks filter their emails. So it will go into a big pot, and they'll say, okay, this email is coming for Mr. Smith, it goes there. This one is coming for Mrs. Rogers, it goes there. Whereas if they have their personal email, so if it says lawrencepowers@4kbw.com, I know that that's probably going to go straight into his inbox. It's not going to get filtered out by his clerks. So always look for that. That's a little trick that I always use, because there's no point sending an email when you can see it's going to go to their clerks. The clerks are going to say, oh, well, we've had 50 of these already this week. It's just going to go into the bin. They can wait for the next application round to put their applications in. So that's one of my biggest top tips. Always check what the email address is for chambers and specifically barristers on their profiles. I think just in terms of longevity, it's keeping up those relationships. So even after you have done a mini or a back scheme with someone, keep in touch with them. Even if it's just an email once every sort of 3 to 4 months, just saying, you know, I'm at this stage, I've got my bar, I'm now on my bar course and I'm looking for a bit more experience. Am I able to come and spend 2 days with you in my Easter break just to give me a break from studying? The likelihood is that every barrister will probably say yes to that, unless they have a very serious case that they aren't able to take you on. They would say no. So I think keep in touch with all those little relationships that you are making throughout, not just law school, but also bar school as well. And I think just remembering that in terms of just networking, I think like Nirusi said as well, this is a profession-long skill. And it's not just a skill that you'll need with your professional clients, it's a skill that you will need with your lay clients. Because I can tell you that no client wants to sit there and listen to you talk about law, or listen to you try to network with them or try and find out what's the best thing they've ever done. They want to just have normal conversations, and for you to go to networking events, meet new people, try and build relationships. That is what you will be doing. As a solicitor, you're probably going to be more face-to-face with your clients, and that is something you will have to build up. Normally, they say building a rapport with your clients. But also, as a barrister, you have to sort of come in last minute, very quickly, build up a rapport, probably within 5 to 10 minutes if you're in the criminal sector, and then go in and represent them. And sometimes those little skills that you get from networking, you know, the 2-minute little elevator pitch, sometimes that can help. That can help relax you a little bit as well, in terms of being able to introduce yourself to your client very quickly and explain what the next steps are in the process. So those are my sort of main tips that I would hopefully you can gain something from this as well.
Thank you so much for that. I definitely second that, even though I am not close to a networker at all. And I don't think anyone has a stronger LinkedIn than Harry, which I would massively agree on. Just to add, again, I don't know much, but I once heard from a webinar that if you are too much, because once I sent one person about 10 messages, I was so keen to find out more about them. If you do overpower people, just apologise. Listen, I'm so sorry. I was extremely excited to meet you, and clearly, as you can see by my 10 previous messages, to speak to you, I apologise for overwhelming you. And then most times they will understand, because they've probably had the exact same from about another 10 people. So I completely agree. Korhan, would you like to go next?
Sure, thank you. I've had a lot of experience with in-person and online networking, and from what I understand, there are 4 different types of people. One, those who can network in person, those who can network online, those who can do both, and those who can't do either. And I think it's important to identify where your strengths lie, because networking is an investment. It does take time, and you're essentially building a pipeline of contacts for your future career. So identifying where your strengths lie is key to developing a networking strategy. So what I would say from the digital side is, and in terms of mini pupilages and judges marshalling, I have a criminal court judge who stops me in the street and comes over and speaks to me because we spent 3 days together and we built up a great rapport. I have barristers who I spoke to for less than 2 minutes who stopped me in the street and asked me how I'm doing. And ultimately, everything you do, every message you send, every connection request you send, this is all part of your networking, and you need to treat it as your professional reputation, because if you do something online which upsets somebody, then people are going to know what you've done. And this, you must treat the networking approach as really enhancing your reputation, even though it's online. When I went to the pupillage fair like 2 years ago, there are so many different chambers there, and you don't have time to speak to them all. There are hundreds of people around each one. So when I found out who was there, I did some research and targeted who I wanted to see and how to best invest my time. And these, the people I spoke to, I emailed the next day and said, it was really great speaking with you. Thank you for the insights you've given me, X, Y, Z. And these are contacts that I still have in my network now and who I engage with regularly. And what I would say is, in terms of digital networking, I think it's easier for me because I know a lot about the person before I approach them. When you walk into a room, you know nothing about that person potentially, and it puts you on the back foot. So what I've done is try to enhance my LinkedIn to enable me to network effectively. And the likes of Harry, who are just putting out so much valuable content every day about commercial awareness and how to make it as a solicitor. It's the kind of stuff which not only enhances your personal brand, but enables you to grow your network. And what I would say, it's essential to have a cultivated, targeted network on your LinkedIn, because what you want to do when you scroll through your feed is see information that's relevant to you. And a result of me doing that, I've managed to pick up a position as a marketing director for a new student startup, which is great for me because I can grow my own brand and enhance my skill set, but I can also help a company to grow into something which is going to be commercially successful in the future. So in terms of your LinkedIn, you may not realize that on the mobile app, you can actually add more information into your headline than you can on the website. There's actually quite a few more characters you can put in. And that's really important because, you know, you may need to get a few more words in there. You need to use your LinkedIn effectively, your headline particularly, because this is what determines most your profile visibility, how often you show up in searches, and essentially it's your hook as to why people need to look at your profile, accept your connection request if they get one, and remember who you are. And in terms of your profile, some of you, if you look on the right hand side of your profile, slightly down from the headline section, you'll see a part called people also viewed. Now this is serves up to people who are looking at your profile the profiles of people previous visitors looked at, and that's because there's a common denominator. Maybe they have on their profile that they're going to City Law School, or there's some kind of similarity. So you don't want to have that on your profile because you're telling people who are looking at your profile, oh, by the way, people who looked at me also looked at this person. So if you go into your settings and privacy, 4 levels down, you can switch that feature off. So that's really going to enhance your marketability and networking ability because you're not telling people who your competition is. In terms of networking as well, you need to build a targeted network. You don't want to fill it with people who aren't anything to do with law. Mine, for example, is full of barristers, solicitors, law students, undergraduate students, legal recruiters, marketing recruiters, and targeted people abroad in countries that I'm interested in working in. You need to produce engaging and relevant content because this will build your networking power. You'll have connection requests. I put a post out last week or the week before, and off the back of it, I received 80 connection requests, and they were all from barristers, law students, BPTC graduates, and that has expanded my network immensely. And also, there's no point in networking if you don't have any value that you can add, especially if you're going to be asking people to connect with you. When you engage, try not to tell people what you can do for them. I always approach it as a collaborative relationship where we will both gain from it, but that gain for both of us will become apparent after we've met and we've had some more discussions as well. And don't send blank connection requests. Try to personalize them. On your profile, there's an option to connect, and on the right hand side to that, if you click this drop down menu, that will enable you to send a personalized connection request. I remember once I was going to a conference in Europe, and I found out all the people who were relevant to the company I was working for who were going to that event. There were about 50 of them. So I sent 47 of them a personalized connection request. No problem, connected well. It was, my intro was, hi, I am this person, I work for this company. I understand you're going to this event. We're also attending, and the reason I'm asking to connect with you is so we can collaborate in the future on XYZ project, for example. 2 that I sent a blank request to connected anyway, and one of them took exception to the fact that A, she didn't know me, and B, I didn't personalize the request. And this started a sort of half an hour back and forth online as to why I should have sent a personalized request, and why I was defending myself, saying we don't know each other, but you know, that's part of LinkedIn, you get to know people. And I was wary of my online reputation at this point because this was an influential person in the industry, and I didn't want to damage my reputation, so I apologized profusely and then kind of backed away from the confrontation. Don't appear too keen online. Some of the panelists have already referred to this. I've waited 2 weeks for a reply from a barrister before. They are busy people, and an email can take them 2 hours because it's not just a simple, hi, thank you, this is my response. collaborate with others as well. There's lots of opportunities on here, thanks to Gabrielle and Amalia as well. These networking events give us all a chance to increase our network, share knowledge, and that's a huge part of networking, is being able to collaborate with people and increase your visibility online. And as I say, if you can look through your LinkedIn profile and everything you see is relevant to you, you know you've created a very strong network. The moment you see stuff that is of no interest, it means you need to go through your network and remove the people who aren't in your world anymore. Because if you have a network which is polluted with non-relevance, it will affect your ability moving forwards. That's what I would say from digital networking for this time.
Thank you so much, Korhan. That was really, really helpful. Harry, would you like to go next, please?
Sure. Hi, everyone. So as I kind of began with my introduction, I said I'm sort of a future trainee solicitor at Baker's, and something like the last sort of 12 months or so, I've been producing kind of resources for aspiring solicitors and running my podcast. And obviously a lot of that involves speaking to and talking with networkers and lawyers alike and collaborating. And so I think just to get started, I'd provide a little bit more context about when I got started 12 months ago. I just graduated university and had a bit of time basically between then and starting the LPC. And, I didn't really have anything other than a laptop. And, I didn't know any lawyers personally or anything like that. And I think, especially on a site like LinkedIn, I'd only ever really used it as a digital CV and was connected to family members and friends and anything else. This idea of actually going out there and networking in a real capacity, I just hadn't really done before. And so, fast forward to now, I've had the ability to speak to people from all over the world. I've done really fun collaborative things like this. And more than anything, I've learned a lot from others, which I think is one of the main things I wanted to stress from networking, which is there's obviously a few things that you can do in terms of the purpose behind what you're doing. And, I'm sure that Rob and others will kind of touch on this in terms of there's definitely an element of being able to do it to drive business and to drive sort of business relationships and for there to be some sort of collaboration there. But I think the main reason that I got started and still do to this day is simply information provision. It's for me to learn more about people's perspectives, more about what they do, and to hear from voices and opinions and other people in other industries or roles that I might not have previously considered. And I can certainly say from experience that doing this for the last 12 months has really kind of expanded my knowledge of what law's all about and just how large this world is of legal practice. So in terms of how I got started, I think this notion of networking is really scary, especially to a lot of students, and it certainly was to me. I think when you get started with this idea of networking, I used to picture this room full of 50 people wearing the little white name tags, and everyone knows everyone already, and you're just kind of walking around picking up the free stuff from all the stuff that the firms are offering. At least that's what I was doing. But I think if you're looking to kind of take advantage of what networking can offer, especially with something like LinkedIn, which is obviously one of the go-to kind of networking methods and platforms, given how many business professionals are out there. I sort of developed this kind of 3-part template or structure I use to reach out to people, which I kind of reformed over time with trial and error, and was able to get it to a pretty good consistent rate in terms of the ability to reach out to people and connect and make it a successful connection. You're never going to get 100%, but certainly if you get 1 or 2, you can use those to refer yourself and build forward. So the first step initially, which I think has been touched upon by some other panelists, is simply research. So you're looking to try and find that kind of hook, that kind of common connection between you and the other person. It could be something that you've been to the same school or university. It could be that you've been in the same role. It could be that they've simply posted a piece of content recently, or they've started a project, or have done something in the past, or perhaps you've attended an event together that you found really interesting. So a lot of the times LinkedIn will provide this information for you. You can literally go out and search and filter people based on where they've studied and what they do. But otherwise, if you can't find that kind of initial common connection, have a look at what they've been posting about recently. Look for them on other platforms if they're not active on one, and try to find that kind of initial hook. It's just so you can sort of approach them and say, hey, look, I recently saw that you attended X, or I've seen your content on posting about Y, or had the opportunity to hear you at this event of Z. That's kind of that first step of your hook, and so you're kind of approaching them with a bit of commonality. The second, I think, is the crux of what it is that you're getting to in terms of the purpose of why you're reaching out to that person. So it could be that you're reaching out for a virtual coffee, just the opportunity to chat to people. It could be that you want to interview them for some purpose, which is what I did with my blog when I got started. Whatever it is the reason why you're wanting to reach out to that person, be it to learn about what they do. there's a few kind of pointers I think it's important to keep in mind, especially if you're trying to target someone who, as many lawyers are incredibly busy and you won't have time to go through everything. So first and foremost, I think keep your requests short and simple and to the point. So it could be in reality that you've got like 20 questions for this person that you want to ask them about a given thing that they want to do. But it's probably better to save that until later on when you actually have the opportunity to sit with them in that virtual networking capacity, and instead start with a really simple and short to the point outreach. I think everyone can kind of testify from personal experience when they get a text from their friend, which is like, 400 lines long. You're like, oh my God, I'm going to deal with that later. I can't deal with that right now. Professional networking is no different. And, in the same capacity, you need to keep your sort of messages short and sweet, really. Secondly is personal as well. I think a lot of great stuff about networking comes from asking people's opinions and their own personal perspectives on different issues. You want to try and avoid kind of asking things which are really easily Googleable or that you can just find online or read in a book, because the first thing that people will think is, why didn't you go there instead? So keep it personal as well. And then finally, make sure it interests you and that it's something that you're genuinely interested in. I think, it could be that you're having trouble formulating a question exactly because you're new to this area, but I think just demonstrating your passion and your interest to that person when you're reaching out is kind of a surefire way to go. So keep it short, keep it sweet and specific and personal to that person, because that's going to make it much more likely they'll look at that and go, yeah, sure, I'll be willing to help with whatever it is you want, versus kind of getting a bombardment of questions or something which is very vague or very broad in nature. And then finally, the sort of the part 3 bit, I guess, I think it's just being proactive and being suggestive. So, if you're making that initial outreach to someone on LinkedIn, provide them with a set of dates as to when you're free and available, or suggest a particular format or whatever it is that you're trying to collaborate and discuss with. Reason being is because then it saves you having to go back and forth and try and communicate over what it is you're specifically wanting to do and the kind of logistics behind it. And if that person's incredibly busy, they might not, check their LinkedIn very frequently, or they might not be able to kind of go back and forth as quickly as you'd like. Whereas if you can kind of go to them with the vast majority of the information they need up front, it saves the kind of legwork between the two of you of having to organize something. So that's kind of a really basic and kind of structured 3-part thing that I use anyway to network and connect with people. And I think the great thing about that is whenever you hopefully do get that 1 or 2 virtual coffee or that interview or whatever it is that you're wanting to do, always follow up at the end of it with an asking for more referrals or more people to speak to. So, ask for anyone else. Say, I really enjoyed talking about this particular thing we mentioned today. Could you recommend anyone else I could speak to on that basis? Or do you think generally there's anyone else that I should be put in touch with? The reason you do that is because it takes out some of the legwork from that first initial part of having to find that hook. Because, if you finish a conversation with person A and they say you should speak to person B, when you reach out to that second person, you can simply say, look, I recently had the great opportunity to speak with person A who suggested that I get in touch about this, and so on. So it cuts out some of your legwork, and it's a really kind of easy and quite simple way to essentially kind of just replicate all your previous connections and to kind of help generate new ones as well, really. So that's kind of a basic overview of what I've done in terms of sort of the digital and kind of online networking element. I think that is obviously going to be really important now with everything that's going on with coronavirus. But just a few points on the other side with in-person networking for as and when with that comes back around. So I've been on both sides of the desk per se when it comes to law fairs and career fairs and everything else like that in between. And I certainly kind of sympathize with some of the kind of things that have been said on the panel in terms of it being really quite scary and intimidating. And I think there's a few things you can hopefully do to try and quell those nerves. So first and foremost, and this is a tip that I used to, wish I'd heard personally because I used to fall victim to all the time, which is I don't think you should go in with the focus of trying to network your way to the job on the spot or to make some amazing, never before heard comment or question or something else just for the sake of trying to impress the other person. I think what will really get a person's interest, especially recruiters, is just genuine interest and passion and curiosity about a given topic or professional role, rather than necessarily trying to wow them with some left field question that would get you the job on the spot. I think the reason that's so dangerous is because it puts a lot of pressure on you internally, and you go in with the whole mindset of saying, I need to nail this. And all that does is just build up your anxiety, and ultimately it's very, very, very difficult to do, if not impossible. So that's definitely my sort of first tip. And then my second and main tip is if you're scared of doing it alone or you're not sure what you're doing, go as a group. It could be that if you're at a careers fair, at law fair, at university, go with a few friends and agree to kind of meet back every 5 minutes and to kind of recoup that way. That was something which really helped me as someone who was quite introverted. Just be able to kind of spread out the fact that you're going to be not knowing everyone there, and at least have a sort of safe point of contact you can go back to, can really be helpful in that sort of that in-person environment. And then finally, same tip that applies to online networking also applies to in-person, which is follow up. So, I was at a careers event and I was sort of talking about bakers behind the desk, and I must have offered my email to about 40 or 50 people. And I don't know if it's because they didn't gel with me personally, that might be the case. But I had something like 2 or 3 people follow up, in the next sort of week, and then smattering of others afterward. And by the time that a week might not sound like a long time, but especially if you're a lawyer, that's going to change week to week a lot. You could quite easily forget the sort of conversation you had with someone or the questions they were asking and whatnot. So if someone offers you an opportunity to speak or reach out to them, definitely follow up and show that interest and do it quickly. Simply, for both your sakes, in terms of that's when you've got their attention, and hopefully it'll be more successful. And then also they'll remember you as well and be able to do that. So that's kind of my brief overview of networking and everything else in terms of online and in person. And hopefully that can help some of you, especially with everything that's going on with COVID-19.
Thank you so much for that, Harry. I'm not entirely sure if Lawrence is here. He just had to nip out and take a phone call. So Robert, do you mind going next? Is that okay? Thank you.
Sure. So hi everyone, thanks again. I've seen, I don't want to duplicate too much that's already been said, which I agree with all the panelists. I think they've been great tips. So my first tip is, as you've just seen, I've just dropped my own LinkedIn URL into this chat feature. I would suggest that you all do that, because you're surrounded by like-minded people. You can all help one another. And actually the key to networking is what I call is working warm. So actually utilize this opportunity now to network with current people within this particular group of people that may know people that could help you. So the way I approach networking is, who do I know who can introduce me to somebody I don't know that'll be helpful for me? So that's just one tip I would offer. Just to talk about offline events, one feature, and by the way, there's some great tips on LinkedIn. There are a couple of other features on the LinkedIn mobile app which might be quite helpful for you. Particularly if you go on the My Network tab, you'll see the plus button which appears on the My Network to the right-hand side. There is a button there that says Find Nearby. So if you're at a networking event, you will be able to see who is within the vicinity if they have that feature turned on. So you could do some DD or research, or see who you have any common connections with, or mutual interests or shared passions, whatever it might be. So that's just a really nice feature that can help you with regards to offline events. The other thing that LinkedIn has recently rolled out, which I would hope people are taking advantage of, is the voice feature. So there is a chance for you at the top of if you look at my profile, there'll be a microphone right next to my name, and that allows you to pronounce your name. Now, that's what it's meant to be for, but I've gone a little bit further, and I've used that as a chance for a call to action, and actually to put a bit of a selling headline. So as well as putting my selling message on the top of my LinkedIn profile about what I do and how I can help people, I also use that voice feature, because again, I'm trying to make myself stand out. So there's just a couple of additional LinkedIn features I think you should utilize. I think the key to networking is ultimately you have nothing to lose and everything to gain. Myself as a 12-year business person, entrepreneur for 4 years, business owners, I have had countless knockbacks. So talking from a lot of experience, networking is a process. And I think a lot of the other panelists were saying this. Don't go in with the end goal of, I would need to get a training contract, I need to get a job, I need to get X, Y, and Z, because that's just going to get you demotivated, and it's not actually going to help you at all. It's actually thinking about how you can create a collaborative value-add proposition to the people you want to network with. And the one thing I think a few people have talked about is following up and new news. So important. So I use the word expression new news. So if I haven't spoken to someone or need to follow up, how can I add to the discussion? How can I bring additional value? How can I go back to increase the networks? Is there someone within my network that may be helpful for this prospect? So there's always ways and means that you're trying to additionally network. And remember, the more that you build up your personal brand, and it's who knows you. Everyone says, oh, it's who you know, and not necessarily. It's who knows you, because that's your reputation. So people who know of you, that's your reputation. You want to really kind of keep tight of that, keep hold of that. And ultimately, the more and more people you can kind of network with and build out your networks organically and bring value to them, then things will start to happen. So don't have the end goal at the beginning of the day, I'm going to network, I need to get a job. That will not do anything. Set yourself parameters. Right, I want to get in touch with these 5 new prospects. I want to get in touch with X. I want to talk about this. I want to network with that person. And actually set yourself measurable, probably more smart targets regarding your networking. The other thing is, we're online. Global networking. Don't just restrict your networks now to the UK. We're in a global economy, we're in a global world, we're in an international world. Online is there to really build out your networks. I personally have recently launched a US offering to our recruitment. So now we service US law firms in the US. And how have we done that? We've been networking around our UK law firm contacts. So we speak to a US law firm partner working in a US firm in London. He or she can introduce us to their counterparts in the US. So it mirrors my belief of working warm. So remember, if you just want to network, make sure you're globally networking, expanding your networks. And I think the other thing, which a lot of you have mentioned as well, is around commonality. If you do share some commonality, or you can name drop someone, you know of someone, all of those things to make it as warm as possible will really, really help. And ultimately, the more outbound you do, the more inbound you get. So if you're going to be lazy and just expect things to come to you, forget it. You have to now, in the fiercely competitive world, we're going through a pandemic right now. So nobody owes you nothing, right? I'm just gonna be quite clear about that. No one owes me anything. No one owes me. My business fails, it's on me. I take responsibility for that. So for your networking, it's on you. No one else. You forget the excuses, it's on you. So make sure you're proactive, you put yourself out there. And if you struggle with confidence, or you struggle with certain aspects, then find mentors, find people that can help you. I mentor a lot of people. I'm always happy to help people. But at this point in time, you have to really take self-accountability for your own networking and put yourself out there, and accept that rejections will happen. That's all part of the process. A no is a step closer to a yes. So don't be dismissed or lose hope if you don't hear responses. Following up will always help as well. But there's just a few things I would offer.
Thank you so much for that, Robert. I think Lawrence is back now as well. So Lawrence, if I pass on to you.
Hey, yes, I'm back. Apologies. Gosh, my hair. Sorry about that, everyone. COVID. Right, networking. Well, I've listened very, very carefully, and thank you, everybody. It's helpful for me to come last and then just ride on your coattails. And how I approached this was to look at 2 things. What is the networking goal that you're trying to achieve, and how do you actually then deliver? Because there is talk, but Rob is absolutely right about outbound, the effort that you put in. And the word that Korhan used was investment, and he's absolutely right. And that's your mindset. So let's look at a foundation. Let's look at where we start. Why network at all? Why are we talking about it? What does the word actually mean? It means communication, and through that communication, making contacts of value, contacts that you hope will benefit you, and hopefully that you can reciprocate, because if you can, that is by all accounts the best networking you'll ever have. But why are you doing it? Well, from the conversation this evening, one part is for your career in whether you want to be a barrister or a solicitor, etc. And the other part that's relevant to when you get that berth is, well, how do I then develop my business? Because there's one part getting there, but by all means, when you get there, to me, that's actually not the finish line, that's the starting line. And everything that you've achieved leads you to the moment where you start working, and then you need to be networking. Why? Because there's one thing that every business needs in every country is clients, and through clients you get fees and income, and that gives you cash flow. So networking is an essential ingredient in business, and of course in education too. So it is a very, very important thing that you need to commit time to, and it's not taught to us, particularly any of us lawyers. I mean, I only ever studied law, but it's just not taught to us. It wasn't taught to me at bar school either. And yet it's so essential. And the pieces of advice that you've heard from the other speakers tonight about how they implement it and the value it can bring, and the purpose of getting engaged, it truly is, as Korhan said, an investment that you have to do and undertake. So what do you really need to do in your preparation? Well, you need to prepare. Don't take it for granted that when you go to network, that it will just occur. It's not an easy skill. But with all things, if you invest the time and prep, then you're going to give yourself an advantage over your competitors. So in the circumstances, how can you do that prep? Well, if you're going to a networking event, look at the participant list. And then when you do, look them up. Look up their websites, look up their business, look up what they've been doing, what they're up to. That's just good research. So that when you are in communication, and this is key, that you have an icebreaker. And if you can show interest in someone, and show that you have knowledge about what they do and what they've done and what their business is, they're going to be engaged with you. They're going to appreciate that you have invested time to check them out. So you're no longer a cold call, but you have to put the time in. That is easier said than done, but do it. Look at lists or look people up who you're going to communicate with. Give it that time so that when you go into a networking environment, whether online or in the real world, when we get back to it, you are properly prepared. You have that knowledge in your mind. And on that basis, add it to this: target, 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 target. Do not go in with a spray approach to, well, oh, it's someone over there, let's go over and talk to them, and oh, it's someone over there. Time is limited. You need to be thinking in your preparation, who do I want to target? Now, this applies equally to clients and equally to your career choices with barristers or solicitors or law firms or chambers. Think of who you want to impress in your preparatory phase and say, well, I'm going to make sure I find the right person. Now, in a live environment, that may even mean queuing up, but queue up, wait. Just patiently wait for your moment. They'll realize you're there and then step in. But by being targeted, you really are focusing your energies and your preparation on a particular individual where you have a particular goal that you want to achieve. So targeting is key. General networking is great too, but on the whole, it's not as productive, is my experience in business and in law. It's far better to be trying to interface with someone where you have some knowledge about them, you can have an interesting conversation, they know that you've made that effort, and then that is rewarded in turn by the conversation you have. Now, once that's all done, I've only got 10 minutes, so apologies for zipping through these sections. Do remember this. A couple of speakers have mentioned this. It's about momentum. You can't have that initial moment and then walk away from it and expect it to incubate itself and then deliver to you. You have to go back to it. You have to come back. It's sort of the outbound, and understanding that that doesn't begin and stop with one contact. You have to strike a balance between being there and not being overbearing or overreaching. And you'll find that the more you network, the more you communicate, the more you'll get the balance, the more you'll get the experience, the more enriched your skills will become. So understand, though, that it can't stop. So many times I've seen within the legal sector networking break down because the lawyers just don't follow it up, and you have to. So When you've done this, understand, keep a record, keep a plan, record what you've done, diarize where you're going to go back, and go back to that person. And not just to go back and say, hey, hi there, it's me again, but go back with something of value, go back with content, like Harry suggested. You know, if you're giving something for nothing, on the whole, there are 8 out of 10 and maybe good guys, good girls, they'll come back and say, actually, I appreciate what you're doing. You now start to appear on the radar. So momentum is key. Just that initial meeting by itself isn't enough. You need to go further and have a plan month by month, by month by month, into a year or even longer. That's the commitment and investment you need to make. And get the balance right. You quite rightly to me said, don't overpower people in your approaches. Think about how they're reacting to you and just how you're going to time your follow-ups over the period that you are with each other, communicating. When I started out, Rob mentioned the position he was, which was sort of a disruptor in the sector. I didn't do that. I was naive, period. My only disruption was in my maths class when I was 14, just to give me a shot. But in the business world, in the legal world, in becoming a barrister and staying a barrister and keeping a set of chambers running with healthy earnings for everyone, it also involves being realistic about your networking and tie that into, at a certain point, understand that they're good targets and they're bad targets, so that you can realign, start again within a few months, say, right, I'm going to go to another group of people with a different plan. I'm going to learn from my mistakes. I'm going to learn from my successes. So continue to develop your skills, continue to learn from yourself. Do that. It's really, really critical, because no one's there. There's no tuition and teacher with you every step of the way. You are with your step, each step of the way with yourself. So be frank with yourself, scrutinize how you're approaching it, think of your improvements, learn from your failures. It's a living and breathing project that you're entering into. But if you approach it with that positive, we're back. If you approach it with that positive approach and understand that it is continually developing, not just year 1, year 2, but it will always be a part of you throughout your entire business and throughout your career. So commit to it and enjoy it. That's also the final point. You know, you will have failures. Be ready for those, but understand that's just a part and parcel of the whole of the business. And absorb those, learn from those, and keep the positivity, stick with your plan, develop the plan, and go enjoy it. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Lawrence. A great analogy of everything. So, right, we'll go on to the pre-asked questions that was...
Gabby, just before we do that, sorry, Rob, would you like to add the extra points that you wanted to mention? Sorry about that.
Yeah, sorry. I just thought I'd mention a couple of points. And again, I really agree with everything Lawrence is saying. I was also very bad at maths, so we have something else in common there. With regards to LinkedIn, a really good way is to actually engage with decision makers' content. So if you're scared or you're not sure about writing an email or picking up the phone or giving them a call, the best way now is to engage with an insightful comment. Because if they like it or they engage back, it's a very easy way to then start a conversation. So it's a really neat, simple thing to do, but writing and engaging into people's content that you want to speak to will help. And the other thing, I think we've all agreed, LinkedIn, Harry's a superstar. I think you've done a fantastic job, Harry, on what you've done and what you're doing for your industry. So please do keep it up. It's a real pleasure to follow you and be in your network. But what's Harry done is he's produced content, right? So he's put himself out there, and as a result of his outbound content, he's now getting inbound. So think about the content that you wish to create that's probably tailored to your target prospects. And look, you don't need to be an expert, but if you start making content, driving people into these discussions, then you'll actually find that the people that you want to network with will be slowly but surely be drawn to you. And the other thing is consistency. You have to be consistent. You can't just expect this to happen overnight. You know, Harry will probably be the first to admit that when he first started, it didn't happen overnight. And it's a process, and it's a continual process. So consistency. But there's just a couple of other things I would mention just to hopefully help others. And thanks, Amalia, for that.
Thank you for that, Robert. Yeah, so as I was saying, we will now go into the pre-asked questions that was asked on the sign-up form. Again, Amalia mentioned previously, sadly we cannot cover all the questions or we'd be here all night, and I cannot imagine the panellists would like to take up their full Tuesday evening. But we have picked up a few key ones that we think would be important to the rest of the panellists. So the first question is, how do you approach people during face-to-face networking, and have you got any good openers for conversation? If any of the panellists would like to jump in on that question. Go on, Robert.
It's really simple. Flattery will get you everywhere, I think, in moderation. But I think, sorry, were you talking earlier about someone's shoes that you particularly liked at a networking event or something?
Yeah, I know, it sounds so typical girly, but it really is true. Even just you know, going up to them and saying, my name is, I'm a bar student and I've seen you've worked on X case recently and that's an area I want to go into, or even just saying, I don't like the wine here. Sometimes it's the little comments that get them.
So absolutely, and I think, you know, for example, if you were to see Harry at a networking event, if you were to go up to him and say, I'm a big fan of the More From Law podcast, I really like what you're doing for the industry, congratulations on your future Baker McKenzie contract and what you're doing, I'm really, you know, it's a pleasure to meet you. It's very hard for him to back that away, because it showed you've given some flattery, you understand that individual, you've researched them. So I think flattery gets you everywhere. So I think that's a personal thing, to try and take yourself out of your comfort zone, get comfortable being uncomfortable, and then you'll find you'll be successful.
Yeah, I can confirm that that would probably work if everyone tried that event. But no, I'd second flattery as well. I think, and just recognizing they're another human being at the end of the day. Like I had the same problem with interviews, and that you walking up to the person and the whole time you're thinking of them as the big scary partner or the big scary interviewer or whatever. I think just humanize the whole process. Like when I was doing my interviews, you're kind of being taken in between the interview room and where you were kind of getting picked up from, just asking about the weekend, or, you know, if it's someone's just passed recently, asking about that. I think starting with that initial just basic get to know you question is so much simpler than trying to launch straight into the, you know, whatever it is that you're trying to get in a professional capacity or otherwise. Just takes your whole mind off of it, and yeah, you see them as another human being rather than that big scary contact instead.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to add to that question? Okay, we'll move on to our second one. Our second question is, how do you successfully make genuine connections on LinkedIn? It can sometimes feel somewhat superficial, and I want to come across as genuine as possible.
I would just say try and be meaningful in the way you approach them and the way you communicate with them. So if you've attended a webinar or a seminar where they've been a panelist in, or they've spoken about, and there's something that actually caught your interest and you want to follow them up with it, then do that. Like when you or like when you connect with them initially on LinkedIn, add a note and say, hi, my name is Nirusi, I'm a second year law student. I attended your webinar and you said this about it, and I really appreciate you saying that, because I think this, and then often they'll reply back as opposed to just seeing that and then going about their business. So if you want to come across as genuine, try and find ways to like be genuine and not seem generic or robotic. Yeah.
Does any of the other panelists want to add to that, or shall we move on? No worries. So the next question is, how can you add value when the person you are networking with has more experience and more knowledge than you do?
Yeah, I'm happy to take this one. So I think that extends vice versa with mentoring and everything else, that you might be starting out. If you're a student, might not think you have much of a perspective because you haven't practiced law, and you kind of get that imposter syndrome, and I certainly did when I got started doing. But the more I've spoken to lawyers, the more I've started sort of speaking to people, you'll realize there's stark differences between how, lawyers who are currently partners, equity partners now, 20, 30 years into their career, were kind of taught and learned to think, and they developed their experiences versus the experiences that you've had. And that extends likewise as well to everything else that's kind of made them with their personal development in their personal lives as well, in terms of their ability to use or understanding of technology and their sort of cultural understanding as well. So, I've had people come up to me who are, like partners or, 20 years into a career who are looking to get started with, say, podcasting, and they have no idea how to use it. Or it could be that they're getting started on websites like Instagram or Twitter or something, and they've never really utilized it before. I think about what you do personally in your own capacity in your own life anyway, and for me that is my sort of podcasting stuff. Think about what interests you, and just recognize that a lot of the times there might be a commercial or business need for it, and that understanding the sort of the patterns and the way of thinking of different generations is really useful information, especially for firms and especially from a recruitment perspective. It's no good using traditional recruitment methods that might have worked, say, 30 years ago for Gen Z or millennials or so on, if they're constantly on YouTube or they're constantly on TikTok or they're constantly listening to podcasts and so on. So, don't be afraid to share that insight. And from experience, I think a lot of people will be willing to listen because, or at least wise people will be willing to listen to kind of challenge their own misconceptions and ways of doing things, because ultimately it will help them as much as it will help you kind of make an impression and share your thoughts as well.
Thank you for that, Harry. Does any of the other panelists want to add to that?
Gabrielle, what I'd add to that is this: live in your time. And for all of you watching, the vast majority of you are living in the beginning of what Korhan's calling, the digital era, your digital footprint, your digital profile, etc. But also understand how that works through what Harry's discussing, so that what soft skills you have, again, not necessarily taught at your university, go and teach yourself, so that when you are with someone 20, 30 years down the road, they won't have the same knowledge about the digital world that you do. That's your ace in the hole. So you're able to talk about TikTok, you're able to talk about LinkedIn, you're able to talk about other things. You might be able to talk about Hootsuite, for example. Who knows about Hootsuite? Hopefully you all do. You may be able to talk about, there was a question, how do we do anything by email? Well, why don't you run a MailChimp campaign? Create your database in Excel. You can hit a number of people at the same time, but amass that knowledge yourself of the operation of the digital world to amass clients, because this is what the more experienced people are going to want to know, because they don't know. And in your conversation, you'll be able to engage them, and you genuinely will, I assure you, if you're able to say, how have you explored digital marketing? Have you explored working the internet? Developing your website, search engine optimization, chatbots on site, so websites could be 24/7 open to gaining clients. Whether actually you would organize and interact at full accountability, so anyone using your law firm or chambers could access their account 24/7. So that they could see what they'd sent barristers in paperwork or solicitors, what the invoices were. There's so much innovation that's there. And yes, these people may have 20 or 30 years more experience in relation to the operation of their business and law, but they don't have that in relation to technologies that have only just recently come onto the block. And you therefore have the benefit and the advantage. Learn that knowledge, share that knowledge, and I assure you, you will have a lot of people who are very attentive and very keen to be taught by you about these new opportunities that their businesses could avail.
Thank you, Lawrence. Korhan, do you have anything to add?
I do. I would say, when you approach someone, regardless of where they are, what they do, if I would say the person who thinks they know everything actually knows nothing, and that's to say that if someone's so close-minded that they don't want to listen to another opinion or don't want to entertain the fact that they could be wrong, or as Harry said, to challenge misconceptions, then that person maybe isn't worth wasting your time with. It's happened to me on many occasions, but you have the ability that no one else does in that scenario, and that is to offer them a different perspective, challenge what they're there is another way. So it's just be fearless, regardless of who you're speaking with. Just tailor your approach to that person and use their perceived strengths, which may have some people feeling nervous, as a weapon against them. So you can go in with a very innovative angle and say, oh, I read your post on, or you wrote a piece on Westlaw, for example, and discuss that part of their career. So it's just be open-minded and going with an approach which is going to engage them to you. But ultimately, no matter how much people know or they think they know, everyone has the scope to learn more and continue to develop themselves.
I would just add to that, and I think, can you just repeat the question, Gabrielle? Because I just want to kind of make a point on that, just the exact phrasing of it.
Yes, of course. So it says, how can you add value when the person you are networking with has more experience and more knowledge than you do?
Yeah, so it's mindset, okay, because everyone has value, and I'm not going to duplicate what everyone's just said, but everyone can bring a value, and I think Korhan, Lawrence gave some really great points there. And even if you think they may know it, the reality is people are busy. So if someone writes to me and it can save me time and it's targeted, that's still valuable, right? Business owners, barristers, partners, you know, our precious thing is time. So actually, if you can find a way to communicate, but you have to get into the right mindset that you have a value. So why don't you, before you approach these people, write down the things that you're really good at. Write down the things that you think potentially could add value to this person. Write down a lot of things so actually you can be really tailored and thoughts in terms of your approach. But that questioning says it has to be that you need to change your complete mindset, that believe in yourself. Believe that you do have a value and you can communicate that to people, because I do a lot of mentoring, but believe it or not, I have people, I believe in upward mentoring. I learn so much from the next generation, you know, far more than my current peers, current entrepreneurs, current business owners, because that is the future. So I embrace learning from people beneath me. So I'm not saying everybody will, but you will have a value, you will have skills of value. So have a mindset that actually you're going to this person that's going to really help them, rather than they've got a lot more experience than me. They're on this sort of magic, you know, high hill. I think Harry was talking about really humanizing things. Completely agree with that. At the end of the day, they're just another person. So, you know, go to them and switch your mindset, and I'm sure you get more results.
Thank you so much, Robert. Our next question is, what is something you should never do when networking?
Give up.
Be rude. And what I mean by that, I know I've said it before, is sometimes, I know even sometimes you feel like you're a bit pushy or you're asking too much, but sometimes there is just, people see it as like a give and a take. So they would literally go up to someone saying, hi, my name is Saira. I want to do 1 week's placement with your firm. And that's it, that's the conversation. You might not think that's rude, but from the receiving end, that's actually quite rude. You've not stated even what stage you're at. You might actually be too young to be able to apply for it if you have to be, let's say, a third-year student. You've not even said what you're interested in. You've not even asked me what my name is. So you've not even taken any sort of courtesy steps. Things like that. So although you might see a sort of a give-take relationship, just be careful of how you say things and how they come across. So like we said before, have your little 1 or 2 sentences where you can introduce yourself and they can introduce themselves as well. Because that's one of the most off-putting things. And even I've experienced it, not just in LinkedIn, but in person as well. So I think I'm still relatively young, but people still do come up to me and they'll say things like, oh, how do I moot? I'm like, what do you mean, how do you moot? And they're just like, I just want to know how to moot. I was like, okay, it's not really a skill that I can fully teach you. You have to develop it. You literally have to go out there and put yourself out there in a mooting competition, take part. And it's just sometimes questions like that where I understand what she wanted, this particular girl wanted. She just wanted help and experience, and she didn't know how to get it. But the way it came across was just like, how do I moot? And I didn't know how to take that question. So I think making sure you really do tailor what you say to people, especially in those first 2 minutes.
Thank you.
I would just say don't be pushy, inconsiderate, or I don't know, don't feel like you're entitled to something. Like obviously you have an opportunity to connect with this person, and this person is already connecting with you, so they have some interest in you, but just don't take a step further than it needs to be. Obviously, if you need help, like be systematic, be strategic and smart about it. Yeah.
Thank you. So the next question is, can you get a proper understanding of how a firm is, even by networking with people from the firm? As obviously no one is willing to tell you negative about the firm's culture, etc.
I can lead with this briefly. I think, for example, when I chose my in of law, when I chose my BPTC provider, I went on the kind of vibe that I got from visiting these places. So I got a different vibe from each one, and it was the ones I clicked with straight away, which helped form my decision-making process. And I think culture is so important, especially looking at pupillage applications. All the websites that my peers for commercial pupillages, their websites full of top 5 unis, PhDs, first class scholarships. I'm from a working class background, and I feel so out of place that maybe I should be doing something else with my life, but that's my own internal imposter syndrome. But what I would say is you can get a feel for the culture from speaking to people. If you're wanting to get a job somewhere where they are all Oxford, Cambridge, masters, PhDs and firsts, it's going to be difficult. Maybe that isn't the right culture for you, and you can kind of get the idea of how the place works with speaking with people. And the guys on my course make Boris Johnson sound like he's from Peckham, so it's kind of, I know I've got an understanding of the types of people these are, and as a result of that, I can understand what the chambers are going to be like, and the kind of person that you need to be within that culture.
Yeah, I think if you're looking to get the sort of fuller picture of what working life is in a firm or whatever, I think I'd just slightly rephrase the question, reframe how you're approaching it. So rather than trying to say, I don't know, why shouldn't I work here? What's the worst thing about your job and everything else, and kind of phrasing it in that negative sense. I think just phrase it and say, what are the expectations like? What's your average day to day like? What are the initiatives you get involved with on the side of things? And then infer from that, based on your conversation with other people, what the expectations and the reality of that is like. Obviously it's no secret that law is incredibly demanding as a profession, and that you are exchanging hard work and long hours and time in exchange for, salary and the prestige or whatever else that you kind of find as the interest point for you. I think just frame it about expectations, especially if you're in an interview scenario and people are saying, have you got any questions for us, for the interviewer, for the firm? Asking those kind of questions about the expectations of what it will be on you as a trainee and going forward, things like billable hours targets for associates and so on. It demonstrates an air of understanding and a kind of recognition on your part. You realize what it is that you're kind of willing to commit to, and what interests you, and the fact that you're understanding about what it is you're going to do. There was a recent survey by Keys I saw as well that kind of surveyed firms up and down the country by size and practice area, and they said it's not just the fact that your skills and your academics, motivations, and everything else are great as well. It's your understanding of the profession and the career path and what comes along with it, and progression and so on. So I think just framing it about understanding and expectation is probably a good way to go in terms of getting the fuller picture as to what everything's about.
I just wanted to add to that, and like in terms of sort of understanding what the negatives are of a particular set or a chamber or a firm. Again, like Harry said, just think about the way you ask or frame that question. So I'll give you an example. So when I was in a mini pupillage, I obviously tried to build a rapport with the barristers I was shadowing, and I did notice something that they changed their sets. So I'd ask, I see that you changed from this set to this set. How comes? I wouldn't ask it like that, but yeah, I would just ask, or how have you found it since you've moved to this other set? Is there something that really pushed you to moving? And then they would answer, and they'd some of them will be really honest and tell me exactly why they moved. If there was something that pushed them, they would be honest, but other people might not, and you just have to sort of respect that. And I guess some people might not want to say bad stuff, and that's fine, but it's just about how you talk to people. And if one barrister doesn't tell you what you're after, then ask another person. They might be a bit more forthcoming.
I would just build on that as well. Speak to recruiters. You know, not just saying that for my own self-interest, but the legal recruiters have a good grasp of the market and what law firms are doing or particular firms are trying to achieve and what's happened. I think don't be lazy, cover the basics, go and look on Glassdoor, look at some of the reviews. You know, why don't you speak to people who have left the firm? Find out why they left the firm, what they liked about the firm, what they think might be good for you. And just bear in mind, these are all individual opinions. You should form your own opinion. So whether it's a positive or negative, and I like the way Harry suggested there in terms of rephrasing that question in terms of an expectations point of view, but it all comes down to links back to what we're discussing this evening, which is outbound. So the more you do, the more time you invest, the more you research into these things, the more you'll get out of it. So yeah, I think do all the online checking, reach out to people, utilize LinkedIn, and form then your own opinion that's relevant to you, taking on board lots of other opinions.
Thank you very much, guys. Our last question comes from the chat from Fatima, and she asks, how do you balance a public profile on LinkedIn with trying to also keep yourself private and safe? Because most of the connections are not physically met, they're not close. So how do you network without being in the public eye?
I think to a degree you can't network without being in, I guess, public eye, maybe depending on how you define that in terms of, you know, you're not making the frontline newspaper news or social media or whatever. But, you know, I think as we've kind of explored today, there's a few methods of doing it. And ultimately, you know, especially if you're doing this in a professional capacity and you're doing this with the aim of meeting other like-minded professionals, you know, give it the basic test of, you know, would I want my prospective boss or my mum seeing this if I'm talking in public, posting about this publicly? You know, I think it's wise decision just to steer clear from at least public discussions about everything from politics and other kind of varied political opinions and personal opinions where you could easily get into a furor or a disagreement or a misunderstanding, and just recognize that, you know, in the vast majority of situations, especially if you're on something like LinkedIn, people will see your profile as your landing page or your body of work, your quote unquote personal brand and things you've done to date as you, and then they will infer based on your actions and what you're asking about what you are as a person and what you're like. So, you know, as long as I think you're being quote unquote normal and you're kind of doing common sense things, I don't think you have anything really to worry about in terms of putting yourself out there publicly. And I think, like we've kind of discussed throughout this session, you know, don't feel like you need to jump straight to the big leagues and, you know, making content or reaching out to really high kind of profile individuals or people who are really senior. Start small and do it within your peers and get to know people in your cohort, in your university, create projects with them, because I think doing that will hopefully give you a bit more of exposure to what it's like to at least put yourself out there in the capacity of speaking to people in a way which will quell your nerves and yeah, hopefully not get you too worried about doing that on a larger scale.
Thank you, Harry. And to conclude that, I'd like to invite each panelist to maybe say some final words, and perhaps if they each say one takeaway that they wish students take from this session, that'd be really, really helpful. Nirusi, would you like to go first, please?
Okay, sure. So if I had to give one takeaway point, I would just say just sort of be brave and like just go for it and just network, but also be polite and respectful in how you do it.
Thank you. Saira?
I think much of the same. Take that first step, send that first LinkedIn message, you know, send that Twitter DM to them, send that connection request, like we've said. If you want to put something in there that's a little personal, you know, you just want to get to know them, put that in there. But ultimately, it's you that's going to have to take that step.
Thank you. Korhan, would you like to go next, please?
I would just say reputation is everything, as they say in law. Just ensure that everything you do does not damage your own personal brand and only enhances it. And like Robert has said, everything you learn from people must go to forming your overall opinion on that matter. Always dig deeper, always look at the wider picture, and don't always think about the here and now, but look at the when and if, and that will help you to map your strategy to complete whatever it is you're trying to do, particularly in networking.
Thank you very much. Harry?
Yeah, I'd just say be concise and be consistent. You don't need a wealth of experience. You don't need a huge fancy project. You don't need a really impressive title to get started. Spend literally 5-10 minutes a day, even just flicking through names of people you might be interested in. Create a little spreadsheet and then just go for it. You know, when you get those conversations, try and check up with them on a semi-regular basis, or at least, you know, those initial outreaches, do that. And yeah, keep it concise and keep it consistent. That's the two easiest ways to get started.
Thank you. Rob, would you like to go next, please?
Yeah, it's well publicized, but your network is your net worth, and I think, you know, the more people that you can bring into your tribe, your community, the far better off you'll be throughout your career. So starting earlier. And the other point is, do more. You can always do more. So I always encourage people, if you think that's the end, do more. If you really want to go on and achieve and hit your goals and your aspirations, do more.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, Lawrence.
Yes, again, thank you for giving me the thinking time. What I came up was this as a takeaway, because what you want is something bite-sized that really sticks out in your mind. And I just said this, which was the 3 Ps, which is planning, preparation, and personalization. Planning, start, understand, invest, commit to what you're going to do. Preparation, then do the prep work. And personalization, know that little thing about the person that you're approaching.
Thank you so much for that, guys. So I will conclude there, just due to the time. However, I really want to thank the panel for all their advice and sharing their expertise this evening. Even though not everyone is on camera, me and Amalia do love doing a little virtual clap to thank the panel. So
Golf clap, golf clap.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm sure they will be happy to connect with you on LinkedIn, but please remember their top tips from this evening, and drop them a message stating who you are and where you've met them, etc. Thank you for joining the session. And again, if you have enjoyed this, please let us know and look out for any further or future events that me and Amalia will be hosting. We do have a current one in the works that we are planning, which will be on transferable skills, discussing things such as your day-to-day job, virtual internships, minis and volunteering. Amalia, do you have anything to add before we leave?
I'd just like to thank you, all the students, for joining, and thank our amazing panel for all their tips and sharing their experience.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Everyone.
Thank you very much, guys.
Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Have a good evening.